This episode is brought to you by Americas Rehab Campus. Get on the road to recovery with the best rehab in beautiful Arizona. Dial 1-833-272-7342. That's 1-833-ARC-REHAB.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are now tuned in to the ARCast.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the ARCast. My name is Buddha.
And I'm Michaela.
And we are joined today by two very powerful and funny and awesome women are joining us in the studio today. Please give them a huge round of applause for Miss Tori and Renee. Yeah. Packed house tonight. How's it going, guys?
Good. Better now.
Yeah?
I want all applauses now. Anytime I walk into a room, just like,
Here you go.
thank you.
Got another one for you. And then we even have the
Okay, so you can't see it, but she's over here already doing the hair flip.
Fuels my narcissism. I'm like filled up for the day. Thank you.
It's all right. It's good energy, man. I'm excited. We're sitting here talking a little bit before the show started, and it's like, yeah, I'm just sitting here watching because this is going to be a good episode today. So I want the listeners to kind of get to know you guys and get to know how, this podcast even came about. So Miss Tori, what I know you've been working with ARC for a little bit, right? How long have you been here?
Yeah. So I joined ARC in November of 21.
Awesome.
I had left teaching after 7 years, and I loved every minute of it, but it was time for a change for, my own mental health. It was just, I wasn't serving students the way I wanted to, so it was time to head out and recognize that it was time for a change. So I got a paralegal certificate, and ARC needed a paralegal.
Nice.
And so I stepped into that role, and it has just been fantastic. I worked in a Title I school, so a lot of my kids, when I was teaching, were experiencing homelessness, experiencing poverty, struggled with parents who had mental health issues, addiction issues. So I wanted to kind of work in that same population, to put it in a weird way. And so being able to work with people who are striving so hard to protect mental health and care for others and all of that, it just kind of filled that space in my life that I felt like I still needed. And so even if it's on the legal end of things, which is interesting in and of itself. And so I joined into the ARC team, and it's been great since.
Oh, awesome. This is very nice to meet you. And what grade did you teach, if you don't mind me asking?
I taught second graders.
Oh, wow.
Which I loved. I told my principal and anyone who would listen to me that I would never change because they were old enough to, kind of get my sense of humor and kind of sass back a little bit, but they were like junior sassy pants. Like they thought they were super cool, but I was like, okay, calm down, Jerome. Like you're fine. Sit down. Plus, to be honest, you avoided state testing that way, which I saw teachers go through state testing every year. And I was like, nah, dude, like that's third grade start state testing. I was like, I'm never, won't. Never mind. So I did second grade for 7 years. I came through Teach for America, which is a branch of AmeriCorps. So I had zero teaching experience. I had been in theater in Chicago for like 9 years, and I moved out here, and I got picked up by Teach for America. And under that scenario, you agree to a 2-year teaching career, and they kind of place you in a Title I school, which, if for anyone who doesn't know, a Title I school means that a certain percentage of your attendees live below the poverty level.
Wow.
I think it's like 94% or 95%, somewhere in there. I think my school was
below the level?
below.
95%.
Yeah.
Jeez. Wow.
So when I say that, like, my school was very much in this kind of pocket of people who were struggling with very similar issues that we see come through ARC, it was very much a similar scenario. And so I got placed randomly at Mesa, and I did my training. I had maybe 5 days of teaching experience before I started teaching. My first day was my 6th day of teaching in the classroom, which, can tell you something about the state of trying to find teachers. I actually had left Teach for America about halfway through their training program. Just my mental health kind of took a hit in the worst way because it's a very stressful program. But my principal believed in me. She was a wonderful woman, and she was like, "We got you. We'll train you. We'll get you ready to go." And so I stayed for 7 years. I ended up getting my master's in education. I became a national board certified teacher. I really just kind of took to it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
I loved it.
awesome.
And I still love it to this day. To this day, I will always consider myself a teacher.
That's awesome. Well, we're going to have lots of questions coming up, man, because I have questions about like how COVID affected you and all kinds of different things. So we're going to get into that. I wanted to hear about Mrs. Renee. How did this come together with you two coming together?
Unlike Tori, I am still with the school system. So I've been with Mesa Public Schools for 26 years.
26 years.
26. That shows how much older I am than all of you in this room. But hey, so I started off in Mesa Public Schools, and I actually was a substitute teacher. I had my teaching certificate from another state. And way back in the day, if you had not taken Arizona Constitutions, they wouldn't let you teach in the class. So I had to go ahead and take that class to be able to get my certificate. And I started off as a substitute. And that's how I really got to know about Title I schools that Tori's talking about. I worked in a lot of those Title I schools. I taught kindergarten, first and second grade in there. And then after that, I had the wonderful opportunity of becoming an instructional coach. So that's when I went out, and there's so many things that you need to have as skills for a teacher. And you don't always learn those just in school. You need to have coaching and practice, just like you were training for a sports team. So I was that coach. I would go into classrooms, help them to teach better, let them see some of the things that were going on. And then I ventured off and I became a principal.
Wow.
So that was an awesome experience. But that was really the time that I realized the fact that there was so much that's going on in our school systems and so many of the things that are outside of school that affects what's happening with the kids inside of the school. So it's truly the fact that schools are those safe places for kids, or those sanctuaries, but they do come with lots of trauma, and they come with lots of things that we need to address. And the hard thing is many times people think, oh no, schools, you're there to teach reading. You're there to teach writing. You're there to teach math. Oh, you know what? They're even behind in all those areas. And they're like, there's no reason to talk about anything else other than that. But you have kids who come in and they have food disparities. You have kids who come in who have trauma and they have mental health. They don't know where they're going to go to sleep at night. They don't know what's going to be the atmosphere of their home. And it doesn't matter how great the teacher is. That teacher can be phenomenal. And that kid will not learn about reading, writing, and math unless you address those concerns. So the position I'm in right now is I am the Director of Community Partnerships.
Okay.
So I have the opportunity to bring in all of those partners and those stakeholders into our district to help service those kids in so many areas. So we partner with people to help with those food disparities. I met Tori because of the fact that we partner with those who help provide behavioral health services to be able to give those kids those services that they need to be successful in school and in life in general. All the way from we partner with faith-based groups to industry partners, because one thing that everybody really needs to know, it takes all of us. All of the kids that we work with are our true future. And everybody has skill sets and things that they can offer.
Absolutely.
So it takes all of them to come in. Even when we, Tori will say this too. You can be a teacher and I could say something 10 times. Yes, it's this. Yes, it's this. I could say it 10 times. You get somebody in there that's a different voice or a different expertise or something that engages those students. They say it once and the kid's like, oh my gosh, I totally got it.
Yeah.
So wait, where have you been this whole time?
Totally. It's the same thing with a parent. Like your parent could tell you, no, don't do that 10 times. But then your like cool aunt tells you and you're like, oh, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, she's cool.
She was cool. So that's why it takes everybody. And it's an honor for me to partner with so many people in our community to be able to bring those into the schools to help in all of the various areas.
That's awesome. I think that's very important to help with kids, man. I mean, I have two babies. My daughter is 11. I always say she's going on 35 because she's very sassy pants. And my son is 9 years old. And, we were talking a little bit before the podcast, like the world has changed tremendously from when I graduated, from when I was in elementary school. Like we had an opportunity to talk to my kids and my kids were asking us about the internet. And I'm like, dude, I feel very blessed because I'm 35 right now. So I was like in 5th grade is when the internet started getting big. So I kind of knew what school was like before the internet and distractions really were a huge part of, my life. my babies have no clue what it's like to grow up in a school system without any type of internet. And I know that these resources, the schools would try to help children, but at the same time, with more distractions comes a lot more like interference, like with our kids from all different directions, and it's very scary because you never think about that. Like coming here, right? We have clients that come in and we get to know a little bit about the clients, but when you're a part of the clients, you don't see that. You're here for recovery. I can only imagine being a teacher or a principal, you're not a part of the students. You get to see all of those things, like the children that don't have enough food and the children that are coming from this poverty. So like, is that something that started becoming a passion for you guys as you entered into that? Or was that something that's always been passionate?
Well, I think for me, it becomes apparent right away. Like your first day, any new teacher or new substitute will walk in and you can't, especially in a Title I, you see it right away. You see the kid who is tired and sleepy because they slept in their mom's car for the night. Or you see the kid who didn't have dinner last night and, the free breakfast that the school gives is the meal they're going to get for the day. And the free lunch that's their meal. And you hope to goodness that they show up. So you see those kids, and I'll give credit to a lot like Mesa and Teach for America. One of the things that they really instilled in a lot of us, and I think a lot of teacher training programs are doing, is look for those indicators. Like, yes, you're there, like Renee said, you're there to teach math and reading and all of that, but your job is so much greater than that. So I think teachers nowadays, far more than maybe when we went to school, are there to be kind of that social worker side of things. And they're now even social workers in the schools. Like Mesa's really pushed that as an initiative to bring social workers into the campuses to be there, because there are so many issues like that. So for me, it more came about once I entered the classroom. I kind of been prepared of things to look for, but you just get hit with it right away. And it's almost debilitating because you very quickly realize that all of your training, all that you've done, whether it was as little as I did or the full spectrum that you can do, it's not going to be enough, that you need that community support. And that's why I appreciate what Renee does so much, because it is greater than the teacher. The teacher at the end of the day can only do so much. So for me, it definitely presented as I'm in it now and I see it and I'm in the thick of it. And what can I do? Like, should I bring Tootsie Rolls from home? Like, I know it's not nutritional value, but I got a bag of them. Like, what do I do? This kid hasn't eaten in 12 hours. How am I going to teach him subtraction? That means so little at this moment. So it came about for me through my classroom.
And, I appreciate that you said that, because what happens to a lot of teachers is they get burned out. That's when you said that even your own mental health was starting to suffer. Teachers and educators go into it because they really do want to make an impact. We want to make a difference. We want to help. And we didn't want to sit in a cubby and just type on a computer. We wanted to affect the future and to be able to touch a student's life and help them become successful. Well, you start running into all these roadblocks and you start feeling helpless. And then you start taking on the despair yourself and you start feeling like, oh my gosh. And I even had people many times in my career say, I don't know why you care so much. You're not going to be able to help them all. But I would always say, you know what? I helped that one. I'm good. So no matter what I do, I'm always going to help that one. That's why we all have to understand that all of these children, they have their parents, they belong to their parents, but it's all of our responsibility to support them any way that we can. And when teachers are burdened with that, because schools are like sanctuaries, families, when they need services for things, they always go to the school. They'll go to the school if they had a car accident. I don't know what to do. I just had a car accident. What do I do? I don't know. I don't know where food is coming from. I don't know how to get help from my child. I know that they have issues. So we need to help make sure our schools have those resources because we need to fix that when those kids are little. So I want to go on something that you said, though, really fast. About your little bambinos that you have at home. Okay, so you are correct. The internet is so different now, and we talked about age. I graduated from high school when you were born, so I know even less of internet time than you. We had no internet. We had no microwave kind of thing. The Surgeon General's report just came out about the effects of social media for children, and that is some staggering effects. And these are things that when we're working with these youth in schools and when we have children of our own, these are things that we need to pay attention to. So some of the statistics we're talking about the fact that they're so bombarded with all of these images on social media. They're bombarded with all of the talk that's always on social media. It's reforming their brain to where they don't have that rest time to be able to rejuvenate. They're always scrolling and having all that information.
Yeah.
The staggering stuff that it talked about was the amount of anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideation that is a direct impact from social media. And the part that was really scary to me was they did a study, and it was from 11 to 15-year-old students or kids, 11 to 15-year-old kids now not only had suicidal ideation, but it increased by 53% of them had actually made a plan.
Okay. My question is it just social media or is it screen time in general? Because YouTube, like with kids watching YouTube and all those types of things, like we've had conversations here before where, my wife she's such a sweetheart. She always wants to do like family dinners at the table. And that was one of the things that COVID, if you could take anything positive out of that whole situation, was the fact that it allowed us to get closer as a family, right? Because the whole world was shut down. We were eating dinner together. We were doing things together. But I see so many people with children nowadays that use it as like a, almost like a distraction. Like mommy and daddy are trying to have a date night, like here. And I think there's times for that where kids, can have screen time. But I wasn't sure if what you were talking about was just social media specifically, or if it was just technology in general, like the screen time for the kids.
Okay, so the report is on social media. That is truly what it was. So that's the Surgeon General's report. But you want my own opinion?
Yeah.
It's screen time. It's the fact that they don't communicate with each other. So, let's talk as a former principal. So when kids would come in as kindergarten, it would shock me about how they didn't really have communication skills.
Yeah.
So they would go out on the playground and they would go play. And you would see one student in the sand sitting and playing, and the one next to them sitting in the sand playing. But they weren't playing with each other. They weren't communicating with each other. They didn't have those social skills. They didn't get put into play groups. They didn't go out and go in the woods and talk to each other and make believe. They were used to just having information thrown at them through watching YouTube videos or being passive and in that engagement part. Then let's add on the pandemic. Okay, so then we have this global pandemic. And what do we teach the kids in this global pandemic? Oh my gosh, stay 6 feet away from somebody. Don't get close to them. You got to make sure you have a mask on and don't talk and don't communicate and definitely don't touch somebody. You've taken that and actually accelerated that to kids really not talking to each other at all or having the skills. And that's really what I want to say. It's the fact that when they just have lots of screen time or they're doing social media all the time, it's the lack of skills of communication. We don't realize that when you're in and you're talking to your kids and you're driving on a long drive and you play those little license plate games or you play those songs and you're singing with each other, that's a form of communication. That's an active form of communication. You say, okay, go ahead and turn on that Disney movie and sit in the back seat. That's a passive form of communication. So they don't even have those skills coming in that have to be taught. And that is.
And there's certainly ways to utilize, I think parents sometimes hear these studies and it's right. Like you have to be so cautious with social media and the media and the input and the noise that your kids are getting. And there are ways though, I think, to adapt that stuff and kind of make it purposeful, which is one of the things that, we really worked on in my classroom was when we used media or electronics or anything to make it purposeful. I remember reading a study years ago back when I was not even teaching yet, but they did a study on preschoolers and kindergartners who watched Daniel Tiger and the effect that kids who had watched in preschool Daniel Tiger, did they have higher rates of empathy? Because that's what that show is a lot about, right? Feelings and management of those feelings and all of that. And they found that, yes, kids who did watch Daniel Tiger for a certain amount of time did enter kindergarten with higher rates of empathy. But the trick of it was the kids who had watched with their parents. who had or their caretaker or their guardian or whoever who had collaborative conversations about the content in the show. I said, wow, Daniel is angry. What is he doing to fix that anger? Oh, he's stomping his feet, and that's what made the difference. It wasn't Daniel Tiger. Don't get me wrong. My girls watch him because I think it's great, but we have those collaborative conversations of, okay, Daniel felt scared. What did he do when he felt scared? And that's where the growth came from. That's where the empathy came from. So you can use it, but it can't be, it can be. There's a place for a babysitter and electronics because parents' mental health matters too. But if you're trying to utilize it, all this educational content, the star of it comes from utilizing those conversations.
Yeah.
And that's where I think, to Renee's point of like, if it's just passive intake, there's no point. And you're seeing educators take on that role of teaching those social skills and teaching, how to amicably disagree. There's Mesa runs a college and career prep program called AVID, it stands for Advancement via Individual Determination. And one of the big parts that I always loved using in my classroom were, they're called sentence stems, or they're kind of like prompts. And I would give my kids, when they would collaborate, you could not respond to someone without saying the following prompt, which was, what I heard you say was, and they had to repeat what that person said to show that it was collaborative listening. Okay. That I'm not just sitting there, you said your thing, I'm waiting to respond, right? What I heard you say was XYZ, what I think, or I agree, or I disagree. And that was huge. It didn't matter if I was teaching Tuskegee Airmen or 4+4. The point of it was I was teaching how to listen, actively listen, respond in a critical manner, whether that's agree or disagree. And those are the places where I think education is moving, partially, I think, out of that necessity, because you are seeing this kind of passive intake of media that's resulting in kids like Renee is mentioning, where they're just like, I don't know how to function. And it's been, impounded by COVID to make it even 10 times worse.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's interesting too, because you also probably, when you were coming in as a kindergartner, because I feel like I have a unique perspective. I was never a teacher, but I was a nanny, and then I volunteered at Title I and did outreach programs through the Diamondbacks. So I had my hands in a lot of the extracurricular things you could do. So I did see a very different view than you probably saw as a teacher. But I always saw the extremes, the extremely unable to communicate, or the extremely talkative, chatty Cathy, like sit down next to the airplane, you put the AirPods in, they're still talking kind of person. You get those two extremes. But it's like what you said, it's how you utilize what you're putting in front of them. It's like, as a nanny, we had screen time allowance that the parents would want, but we would sit and talk about it. And like the Daniel the Tiger, I remember one of the little girls I had, she came around the corner, she's like, oh, I'm so mad, just like the tiger would do, and I'm like, well, why? She's like, the drawer won't close. And it was like, she totally understood. And it's like, before they go into school, as a parent or a guardian or whatever it is, responsible for teaching them emotion, what they're feeling, what it means. And if you never teach them and they never learn, we're already setting them up for failure. That we're not setting them up for success. And that leads into so many other mental health issues as you go. And it's like seeing that, especially if you're coming from a situation where you don't know where your meal is coming from, or you don't know where you're going to sleep. They're already dealing with emotions beyond just the basic ones that they don't know how to deal with.
Right. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about what happens as they continue to grow up. So then they start using the social media as a communication tool. And you can totally interpret reading a different way. So I might write a text to Tori that says, have a nice day, when I wrote it. But she reads as, have a nice day.
Oh my God, why does she hate me? What did I do?
What did I do? Oh,
that's so funny.
It's so true. So they get their anxiety up. So what happens is there's these little tiffs that happen at school. That's just normal. Everybody argues with each other. Well, these kids will get in these little tiffs. Well, once upon a time, you would go home and that would end. Things would chill out. It would go to a resolution level, and then they would see each other again. Not anymore. Now it's the fact that they keep going and they keep one-upping each other through their communication and how somebody said something
on Snapchat and then something on Instagram and then
and I'm going to unfollow you and you're going to.
Yep.
And that's why the depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation comes up, because then they get stuck in their own head about how big this situation is and how, oh my goodness, she's got this whole group that's against me now and I'm just this. That's why I just think it's not the fact that I don't think social media has its place, because I do. We all use it. It's a great form of communication. I just think it needs to be something that everyone is aware of so that when you have a child who uses social media, you know what's going on. You talk to them about what's going on.
Have healthy boundaries surrounding it.
Have conversations. Talk about who are you following? What Snapchat are you doing? And who's on your Insta? And I don't think it's never going to go away, and it's a tool for us. But the problem is you can let that tool overtake us if you don't have an understanding of what can happen. And these are the things that can happen.
Well, and they set them up in a way that you don't want to set it down. You don't want to stop scrolling. You don't want to be out of the know. You don't want to have the FOMO.
Addiction.
It is. It's a totally different form of addiction. And it's like, my mom always raised us when we would go to school. She would say something so simple, but she'd be like, compliment 2 people today. Something so little. But it was like, my sister and I still talk about it. I'm about to turn 30. She's turning 27. And we still, we go into Target and we compliment 2 people. Or we go into Walmart, compliment 2 people. Something so little. But she also gave when she would say that, she would pair it with, we never know what somebody else is dealing with behind closed doors, because you can have the perfect family photo, but behind that, mom and dad are fighting all the time, or they can't pay their bills, or their water doesn't work. You never know. So, approach people with kindness. And what social media does is you either are trying to tell that story that you have the perfect life, or you're seeing somebody else's perfect life that may not be perfect.
Yeah.
And then you're comparing yourself to it. And it opens your door to even more depression, more anxiety, because comparison is the thief of joy. And it's keeping up with the Joneses was always around. But with social media, it's on steroids.
Yeah. Right?
Trying to keep up. And that's where I think about that, 53% of the increase of people that have made a plan. Well, bullying now has a screen behind it. It's not just okay, I'm going to, go eat lunch by the teacher because they make fun of my apple. It's the apple goes on to the Instagram as a joke, and then this and then that. And it just takes it to the whole next level. And it's like as an adult, I can barely keep up. Where I'm like, good night. How are kids supposed to? It just puts this whole new curveball into them.
One of my things that I'm as I'm listening to everybody talk is coming for me, for example, right? There's a lot of generational curses that I'm currently trying to break from my family, from the way that I was raised. So I try and be the best parent that I can. I try and be the best husband that I can, but I know sometimes I have a fault. I know that there has been times where I'm like, here, baby girl, there's the tablet. I just need a second. What I mean? I'm only a human being.
I think every parent goes through that.
You go through that. And I know that there has to be a happy medium, but technology grows and advances so quickly. I think it's every year and a half technology doubles. This board is going to be irrelevant in a year. It's going to be something bigger and better, right? And social media is the same thing. And I don't even think as adults, we've learned to really curb it and to understand, if you don't even see it as an addiction, first of all, how can you fix that problem, right? You can't clean a mess if you don't see the mess there in the first place. But my question is with the school systems, right? Why aren't there classes that would, bring a young 18, 19-year-old kid in, or someone who's understands that social media, to be able to teach kids how to put those parameters in place, because the parents probably don't even know how to do that in the first place. But
I think that's where you touch on it. If the parents don't know who's coming in to teach it.
And there was a lot of things that me and my teammates, we would plan lessons, tiny lessons, because in your day you have so much to cover. I mean, the national teaching standards cover, I think it's someone studied, it's 35 years of material doused into 12 years is what teachers have to cover. So like
It's real.
trying to find,
Crazy.
to your point of like, why aren't schools doing this? You're like, well, because we're tasked with like 35 years of material that we have to do in 12 with kids who are emotionally dysregulated half of the time. Like it's insane the mountain that we, have built for ourselves, right? Like no one came around and was like, you must teach 35 years. It's like we've just kind of landed here. But we would plan lessons that's like how to do a handshake, how to make eye contact, which culturally is difficult because we know particularly in Arizona, like the Navajo Diné, the eye contact isn't considered respectful. So it was always kind of like trying to skirt those things. But we would try to do these things so that when our kids 15 years from now walk into a job interview, they know what to do. They know what to do because they don't have the privilege of a mom and dad who are going to maybe naturally, teach these things and do these things. And I think, we have to sometimes think about the privilege in that if you have a parent who works in business or who, owns their own job or business or whatnot, like they're going to naturally teach you these things. And we would have kids who come and is like, well, my dad is flipping burgers for McDonald's and my mom cleans houses, all day. They don't have someone to be like, hi, let me teach you how a handshake works, or let me teach you how charisma and eye contact.
Or how to tie a tie.
How to tie a tie. Like all of these things. And that's like, to me, one of my biggest soapboxes. It's like, if I could change the world, 100%, I would completely change, particularly the high school systems and the things that we teach.
Absolutely.
Like, think about the last time that you used the Pythagorean theorem, right?
Hey, come on now.
I mean, I'm just
I
saying.
used it this morning.
Yeah, but being able to write a check.
Yeah, like those are the skills that I want to be taught of. Like, I wish someone in high school, and I was a privileged kid compared by most. Like, I had, everything that I needed in a lot of ways, but no one taught me how to balance a checkbook. No one taught me how home finances work.
Yeah, credit card debt.
Basic investment. Why is that reserved
Just
for a select few?
Adult life skills.
How to fix a car, maybe some basic coding skills. So when 20 years from now, all the jobs are based around coding, like I might be in a good place. So like there's so many things that we're still teaching that I'm like, I'm going to use that when my kid has to learn it, right? I need to know that so that when my kid has algebra homework, I can help them solve for X, Y, and Z, right? But at no point did we teach some of these basic life skills that I'm like, we lived in a system that relied upon the idea that parents had the time, the privilege, the knowledge, the ability to do some of these things that we can't rely on anymore. So how can we adapt and change the public school system to provide some of those very basic skills like, hey, let's talk about social media and how that works and not jam it into, well, I have 10 minutes after PE to maybe help you figure out that that's a highlight reel. And not get bummed about it. And now we're moving on to X plus Z. Like, let's, it's not ever going to be a system that works.
No. And what's even hard too is a lot of times they don't even realize that they're doing things that are negative on social media. So when I would bring in a student as a principal and need to talk to them and do discipline about something that they did on social media, it was shocking to them. They're like, wait, we're friends. I didn't really think I said something that was wrong, or I didn't think I did that kind of a thing. So I think the gamut of the understanding of the power of social media in kids, they have no idea the impact.
No idea.
None.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I grew up in like an interesting time frame. Like I was one of those who like social media started. MySpace was when I was in middle school. Facebook and Snapchat was like when I was a sophomore and junior in high school. So I had both. I had, my teen years without social media and my teen years with social media. And I can tell you the without were 100 times more enjoyable than the with.
Yeah.
Because it creates like this natural division, and maybe somebody could only have 6 friends to dinner, but then you see it posted about it, and then your feelings are hurt and you feel left out and you feel excluded and you start to get sad and you're depressed and all these things. But if nobody could post it, you'd have no clue.
Yeah.
Yep.
You would maybe hear about it, but by that time, somebody else had a birthday party, somebody else went swimming, somebody else's car broke down on the side of the road, and you're hearing all these different stories, and it's not something you can dwell on. But social media stays there.
Yeah.
You can dwell on it. You
FOMO.
can fester. You can all these things.
I'm going to go on record and just say that MySpace is way better than Facebook ever was. That was the coolest platform ever. And
I don't know, top 9.
I mean, but Tom is always going to be your friend. So
yeah, Tom was always your friend. But like, it really is true. I mean, you were able to separate it though. Like if you had a rough day at school or you were dealing with the bully, you could go home. Hopefully you had a parent or somebody there to reciprocate when you came home, and to be able to kind of take that break and to But with the phones now, it's like it's constant notifications. You know what I mean? And people use it as clout now. Like they're constant. I mean, I believe if you're gonna help somebody, you help them. It says even as a faithful man, don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. You help somebody out. Everyone's like, yo, with their phone or whatever, I'm gonna give this homeless guy $1,000. Like, you know what I mean? It's like people are insecure, so they use that as a way
but
too.
See, and I'll play it, and I agree with you, but just like throwing out like a totally different side of what social media does. There's this teacher, I want to say she's from Ohio, maybe. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. But she does something called the care closet. And she stocks her closet at the beginning of the school year with hair bands, hair brushes, soap, toothbrush, shampoo, conditioner, deodorant, food, Easy Max, all these things. And at the very first day, she says, it does not matter at some point in the school year, whether you have money or don't have money or have parents or don't have parents, you're going to need something from this closet. So no judgment from this closet. And she has, through COVID, gained so many followers, and people are sending her, sponsoring things. But it makes you think, too, okay, one, the power of social media to do that, but two, why aren't we doing it in everywhere?
And there are a lot of places who,
but it takes money and resources.
And whose money funded that closet to begin with? Like now it's sponsored.
Yeah,
but it was her money.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was her. And that was one thing. I would add up my receipts at the end of every year, and the amount of money. And like I worked for Mesa. Mesa provides decently well for its teachers compared to a lot of other school districts. I had friends who worked in, South Phoenix, Maryvale, and they didn't have the resources that I had. But even in Mesa, because it's the problems and the things that are needed are so vast. And at the end of the day, Mesa is playing with state money and some federal money. Like they only have to deliver what they're given. I would add up my receipts and be hundreds and hundreds of dollars every year.
Yep.
And like going back to at the beginning, we talked about teacher burnout. That was one of the things that like I had to stop.
Yeah.
I had to stop because I had two little girls of my own. I had to save for them and provide for them. And it started to hurt. And it started to be painful. And it gets you to a point where you're like, wow, like I'm never going to be good. You start to internalize it. Like I'm never going to be good enough. I'm never going to be good enough for this scenario. I will never be enough for these kids because the amount that I have to give, I don't have. I don't, and anyone who does not have it for long. Like those few teachers who are still rock stars, who are like, I've been in it 24 years, they are lightning in a bottle. Because most people who are that giving and give so much and do so much and pay out of their own pockets and don't sleep at night because they're worried about, is Jimmy sleeping on the curb street tonight? And how is he going to be tomorrow when I get in for the day? Am I going to have to make sure he gets an extra breakfast because he hasn't eaten in, 12 hours? Like it burns out, and you start to lose these lightning in a bottle teachers who are so phenomenal at their job and are so kind and caring. And it's completely unsustainable because the people who do the care closets, they don't last forever. Very few do.
And it eats at you once it runs out. Like you feel that responsibility and that role. And so it's just so interesting to me because I always think about it because I go back and forth and, for work in marketing, I obviously utilize social media for our marketing campaigns, which means I have it. So I have to be in the know. I have to be caught up. But there's so many times where I wonder, like, man, if I just nixed it all, would everything be so much better? But it's good and evil with anything. There's always going to be, the angel or the devil on your shoulder for whatever it is in life. And it's finding that happy medium. And it's like, if we can't find that as adults, how do we expect children to find that balance? And something that's it's so normal to us now, but it's really not. It's like scrapbooking used to be like the jam.
Yes,
and now it's a digital scrapbook. And it's like you used to make a scrapbook from your one vacation a year, and now you're trying to make a scrapbook of 365 days a reel. And you touched on it. It's the highlight reel, and there are those few people that get on and they post a picture of them sobbing and they're like, life's not always perfect.
Right. But it's like a perfect crying picture.
I know.
Yeah, but I'm like also, but like when am I ever like having a mental breakdown and thinking to take a picture?
Right.
Right.
I know, man. It's like when my daughter gets mad and she's staring at herself in the mirror. I'm like, bro, get over
Oh, when I get like mad or sad, I can't look at myself in the mirror. It makes me more
That's
mad
so
or sad.
But that's like, as a parent, that's kind of terrifying to me. Like so like our kiddos, I'm guessing, when were your kiddos born? Are they-
20, when were they born?
Yeah, like are they Gen Alpha? Is kind of
2012, 2013.
Yeah, so they're probably like maybe Gen Alpha, Gen Z. But what my idea, my thought about it is like it's terrifying how much our kids now have access to their own image. Like, when we were kiddos, like you took a picture and it was like, oh, I'll see that in 2 weeks maybe if I develop it, right?
Yeah.
But like my 5-year-old, she'll take a picture and be like, can I see it? I'll be like, oh no. No one should have that much access to their own image. It's horrifying.
Yeah.
Or should they take a picture that they ought to not take and think it's going to go away?
Yeah, the
no,
foreverness
those
of
live
the internet.
forever.
I worked for the Trevor Project for like a year. I was a suicide counselor for them, and I would answer it was the greatest year of my life. I wanted to do it so badly, and I went through all the trainings and did it. It was hard. It was really hard. You only do it when you get hired by Trevor Project. If you're a suicide counselor, I was for the chat line. You only do one shift a week because they're like,
nice.
you can't. Like they won't let you. At least when I worked there, they won't let you do more. But
Wow.
9 times out of 10, the calls that I would take, because you get two bevies of calls. You get a call or a chat line that's, I want to come out and I'm scared and I don't know what to do. Or you get the calls that are like, I have a plan. Here's my plan. And you flesh it out with them and you would get to the root of it. And good majority of the time, it would be like social media would be involved to some extent.
And how old were like the
Trevor
callers?
Project's like 13 to 18. 13 to 18. I'm trying to remember because it was like 5 years ago. So my brain has gone through a doozy by now. But it was 13 and older. But I think they have supports in place for younger,
Well, and you think about it. So like I was introduced to social media when I was in my teens, later teens. But like now, 6-year-olds have access.
Yeah.
So what they have access to is so much more vast than the parent. I mean, I got the Birds and the Beats talks in 3rd grade, and I still remember because I was mortified. But my mom was like, I had to tell you, or somebody else is going to tell you. And I'm like, you didn't have to tell me at Mimi's Cafe, and I still can't eat the same 4 foods together because I was like just so freaked out, And like for me, that was too young.
Yeah.
But now all somebody has to do is go on Instagram and the kid sees it and they're 5 and they're like, Mom, why is this happening?
Yeah.
Because it's on there. Even though they take it down, it's on there. It's posted. There's, half naked people. And you can set the parental controls. You can do that, but that doesn't stop them
Oh, it leaks
from
through.
seeing.
Devil
It
creeps
gets
in,
through.
bro.
I mean, there was this, it probably was 4 or 5 years ago now, but there was a YouTube channel that was like Miss Rachel, but not Miss Rachel, something like that. And somebody like mirrored it. So made almost the same exact account, but then halfway through would put like videos of people getting murdered. And like this was what was in these. And you're looking at them and they're like, oh, Daniel the Tiger, click that, sit down. And then all of a sudden you're hearing this thing and they're talking through stuff. And it's like, you can't avoid it. You can't avoid it. And so children are being introduced to things so much younger where like a 13-year-old could have a plan for suicide. Like when I was 13-year-old, I was still thinking I could dig to China.
Yeah.
Right?
Bro, I refuse to get my kids a phone. I refuse. Like I'm not. My mom told me, she said, if you want a phone, you get your ass to work and you pay for your own phone. There's no way. There's no way. And if the people who are like, well, they have to, what if they need something or whatever, how do they get in contact with it? It's like, okay, my kids should never not be around an adult, right? If they need to get in contact with me. I have seen a couple of like apps on, not apps, but actual companies that you can pay about $50 a month for a phone, right? For your kids. And you can monitor everything. They're not allowed to download apps. They're not allowed, like it literally only gives them like 2 or 3 things. Something like that, I wouldn't mind. But at the same time, it's like, I see so many parents where we live, they already have their like little 10-year-old daughters have iPhones. And like, I don't think they put parental controls on it like the way that they, you know what I'm saying? Like they're not doing it.
Well, and what's scary too is like, so they come out with those like watches and like air tags and things that you can use to like keep track of your child. but then those can be hacked. So then you have information of where your child is because you have an AirTag on them, but then somebody that's not a good person knows how to hack that, and they see where your child is. And it's like you think you're keeping them safe, but you just made them a target. It's nothing we do is going to be right at this point. It's
which I think that's the other side of the sword, though, right? Like talking about these things. I want to protect my daughters to the ends of the earth. Like I want to bury them in a hole where they have plenty of oxygen and food, but like you're not coming out until like the world is safe again.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I do feel a drive as a parent to have these conversations. Like my daughter is 5 and we have had not the gamut of birds and bees conversations, but we've talked about things like consent and what your body is called and what things are called, because I don't ever want them to be in a position where they think an adult has the right to have these controls of my body or do something that's because you hear all the time these stories of like, well, I was a kid and I didn't know any better. Like I want my daughters to know better. So how do I guide that line of keeping them safe and keeping them protected and keeping them in content that is proper for them, but at the same time making them aware
and to keep them safe.
To keep them safe, you
and
know?
It's such this like teeter-totter as a parent that you have to take on because it's like what's too much information that you scare them or give them anxiety and what's too little information that they still think it's okay if their teacher wants to do something inappropriate and not trying to like call out a teacher, but that's just what
it's true. Like it's terrifying as a parent in this world of how do I balance you know, the numerous things that could happen to my child and protect them and keep them safe and informed. And also I feel like there's a window as a parent. You're like, I have so much time that they listen to me. And eventually I'm going to hit a point where they're going to be like,
they're
I'm
staring
smarter
through
than you.
you.
Like, you're just like, ain't nothing. And I don't got the cool aunt around to like help with that conversation. So I'm also
cool
like,
aunt.
how do I get my like foot in the door here to be like, it's okay that we have these conversations and normalize this vocabulary for you so that when you are 13, you've always said this set of vocabulary to your parents so that if there is a problem, it's not like, oh my God, I'm stuck in the Mimi's Cafe with my mom and what am I going to do? You know, it's changed.
I mean, we laugh about it now, but like there was like a long period of time where I was so mortified. We'd drive past that Mimi's Cafe and I'd be like,
and there's
so uncomfortable.
Like I'm 36 years old. There's vocabulary I could never use with my mother, even though I know darn well how the world works and blah, blah, blah. I've had 2 children, but I would never. But I want my daughters to be able to say, hey, something is wrong or I have a question or I need to be informed about something, and to have the power to be like, mom is the safe place to do that because she's always been the open and safe place to do that. But I want to do that and protect them with all the filters at the same time.
And I do feel like, especially being in like the nanny world, because I had a lot of families and I nannied for about 12 years before coming into like, you know, a 9-to-5 job. Not that nannying wasn't 9 to 5, but it was a lot longer than that. But I feel like that is like the take that a lot of parents are taking now, is like creating that open line of, I mean, I think it used to be like a little taboo. Like, I mean, I was so private and I wouldn't talk to, I mean, I knew it existed and my mom gave me the talk, but that was the only talk we had about it. It was like, that's it. That's done. Black box. Shh, don't want to hear it, you know?
Check.
Yeah. But it's like now I feel like that is like, it's becoming more prevalent that parents are becoming their safe place, or like, you can talk to my mom if you can't talk to her, or like come over, you can ask my mom questions. She's so cool about it. And it's like, it's nice to know that like as a parent, like hear other parents do that. Like I'm not a parent yet, but like it was very good for me to see like, hey, this is a normal conversation that they're having in their house. Cause like my mom did a great job. My parents did a great job. Yeah. I don't like to say that I was sheltered, but I think it was very intentional what happened in her home. And I think that's what is still like so important to this day. But then you have the group of kids that don't have parents that can even think about being intentional.
Well, and to cycle it back to education, that's one of the things that I would love to have introduced into the public school system is like, okay, there's the conversation of like what you do with sex education, and that's above and beyond my purview. But what I would love as a parent is to have parenting classes for people to like, here's basic child psychology. Here's, you know, little things of how your child is going to develop to give comfort. You know, my dad always tells me, he's like, parenting is going to be the most important job that you'll have that no one provides any training for.
Right.
Yep.
The only thing you know about parenting is what your parents did, and whether you think they were great or think they were terrible, or you take and use what you liked or didn't like. How is it that this is a job that we provide zero education on. And if we had that, how many, you talked about breaking cycles, right? Like how many cycles could we break in that process if you provided some basic education on how to raise a child and how to keep them safe in as, an unopinionated way as you could,
And it's so hard, and it's like the pressure. Like I know that like in certain churches, in a church that I went to years ago, they offered classes for parenting to get introduced to. And like what I studied in college, I told my mom, I was like, I may not be using my degree, but I will when I'm a parent, because that was what I studied, was the psychology of a child. I was like, it will be the best money I spent when I come to be a mom, and like in nannying, how I used it and all the things. But it's so true. Like you literally, like, especially for people that have kids unplanned and it's a surprise, like they may not have been ready. And then they're like, holy crap, I have this whole other human to take care of and I could barely take care of myself. And this is a lot of pressure. And that's a lot to take on with zero guidance. And then you throw in money issues, or I can't put food on the table, and then they're feeling burdened. And then maybe that closes them off to their child. So then their child's feeling like they resent them, but really the parent's just feeling guilty. It's like this huge emotional like roller coaster that people are on with zero assistance.
Yeah, because then the child shows up and you're like, okay, we're going to teach the alphabet. And you're like, oh,
yeah,
not priority now. Not priority.
I was actually really proud of this moment yesterday. My son, so I've been terrified for the last few days because my baby boy went with my brother-in-law and their family to Rocky Point, right? And I love them, I trust them, but like I always worry, like, okay, Michael, if you need something, call us. Let us know you need something. I want to know that you're safe and you're okay or whatever. And yesterday I was proud because I had been stressed about it. I miss him. I'm not used to him leaving like that. And he's on a video chat with us. He got online and then he goes, he talked to his cousin. He goes, can you, he's only 9. He goes, can you leave really quick? I need to talk to my parents. Aww. And the little kid left. And then my son shuts the door and he's like, okay, so somebody got mad at me and they were upset and I tried to apologize but I love the fact that he felt safe enough to not only talk to us, but the fact that he wasn't afraid that other people were in the room. He was like, hey, I need to talk to my mom. Yeah. So leave. And I'm going to have this one-on-one moment with my parents right now. Like that made me feel really
That's
good.
A parenting win.
That's
to like
huge.
have.
Psychological safety. That's what that is.
Absolutely.
We all have to have that. It doesn't matter where you are, and you're providing that. So that's where schools need to provide that. The whole community needs to provide that. Everybody needs to feel psychologically safe so that they can open up.
Yeah.
It's your son also made himself vulnerable. Hey, Dad, I made a mistake. That's a vulnerability. A lot of kids and a lot of even adults don't want to share the fact that they made a mistake because that made them vulnerable. But he has that psychological safety with you that he was willing to open that up and show that to you. And you had that open conversation and talked about it and are able to move forward. So what a great win for you as a parent.
That really felt really good because, just being anxious. I mean, I know I'm not supposed to be anxious for anything. It's something that's out of my control. But, I always worry about that. My wife is she's a sweetheart. She's very good with that. The way that she talks to the kids. It's like, like you were talking about respect for your body. Respect your body. Don't let anybody, do this and that. Don't, if an adult tells you, this is our secret type of thing. No, you come talk to mom and you come talk to dad or whatever. And she does it in a way where the kids aren't terrified, but they feel comfortable, and it's a blessing to me because my parents, I love them, but they separated, and there was a lot of, I think going into that statistic you were talking about, people living under the poverty line and stuff. There's so many families that, we're meant to have the husband and the wife or whatever, your preference is, but there's meant to be 2 people in a household to raise a child. It's especially now that, women are working full time. It's not like back in the 50s where the husband came home and smoked and drank his wit. Like, it's just, you know what I mean? Like now,
different.
Yeah, relationships are meant to be 100.
That also brings up something really interesting, at least for me. Like, so I was raised in a house where my dad worked and my mom stayed home. My mom always did like little things on the side to bring in income and just help out and do whatever. But I was raised in that house where like my mom didn't work. And I was judged as like a child. They're like, well, your mom doesn't work. So what are you talking about? And it's like so crazy because that was the norm. And now it's not the norm. And I can't even imagine what it is now because I've been out of school for like, what feels like really long. And I know I'm the youngest in here, but it still makes me feel old and I'm going through a midlife crisis since I'm turning 30. But it's just like, it's so interesting because like my sister and I have this conversation a lot since we are getting to be close to that age where like we are going to be parents and what do we want to do for our kids for school. And we had a very interesting upbringing because we actually were homeschooled in private school and in public school. So we like had the trifecta of knowing what it felt like. You know, we started in private school and then it was not at that point in time, private school didn't offer like anything accelerated. So like because I was a little bit ahead and I don't know how to say that in like a nice way, but like I was accelerated. I needed to be challenged. They didn't have the resources. So then my mom pulled us out and that's when we started homeschooling. And so then I got like that side of things. And then we went to public school because my parents thought it would be better. They had accelerated programs. I could start college and high school and do all of that. But it was like the differences in all three and the way that children were in, you know, private school versus public school, like there was just so many different variables going on. I don't know really where I started that, but
you're on
that's where I'm at.
A great point of that. Like we live in a state where school choice is very prominent. Whatever side of the coin you land on, I flip sides of the coin every day as a parent and an educator and an advocate for public schools. Like the bevy of emotions that I feel about school choice it's complicated. We've, you know, these gray areas that we live in. But school choice is very prominent for parents. Either they're clued into it and they know what their choices is. We've seen the recent expansion of the ESA funds that allow parents to subsidize things like private school tuitions. And so there's a lot of choices to be made for parents in their schooling. And my choices have changed over the years as my daughter has entered kindergarten. And it's kind of crazy because we didn't grow up. This is recent, right? This phenomenon of school choice is very recent, and seeing how public schools are coping with that, with the expansion of charter schools and private tuition subsidies and all of this, there's just a lot to cope with and a lot to think about. It used to be just like, well, what school are we zoned for? We better buy the house that's in this good school district. Like
that's not the case anymore.
Not the case. A lot of our funding for schools are very much still based around that, but it's not the case in terms of where your child goes to school. They could have a boundary exception. They could be going to a charter. They could be going to a private, whether you're paying out of pocket or using tax credits or scholarship awards and all of that. It's just, it boggles my mind how much choice there is now and how that can affect what public schools do, because I feel like it almost, weird tangent, sorry, but I feel like it turns public schools even to more of a business than anything else. Like,
100%.
Have to like keep up and be like, come to us, you know?
Yeah. Because you reminded me what I started with to begin with is my sister and I's conversation of like, what would we do? And like her husband's opinion and mine and my boyfriend's opinion, because those are conversations we need to have before we would get married and have kids to make sure we agree. And it's like, you think of, you know, what we started this podcast with of, you know, under poverty level families and not being able, like, they already have so many things that they're working on. So how do they even have this conversation to know what's best or to know? And you know what? What's best for me may not be best for you. And that's fine. Yeah. But that's the beauty of being able to choose. But you also throw this whole new world of information at people when they are given a choice. And it's like...
And I think you're right. I think they don't have those conversations. They don't, because if you're sitting there, like, why I appreciate so much being with ARC and the work that ARC does is if you're sitting there as a child and your parent is dealing with a substance abuse disorder or dealing with an addiction of any sort, let alone multiple jobs, off-hour jobs, you know, like during the pandemic, I taught, you know, online, and I would watch my kids, and they were 7 years old, but they were making sure that their 5-year-old little cousin was sitting there for their kindergarten class to make sure they're paying attention, because no kindergartner knows how to sit
and watch the screen.
Watch the screen, unless it's got Daniel Tiger on it, right?
Yeah.
Go full circle. It's not happening. So my students weren't sitting there learning because they have, at 7, the responsibility of raising their siblings because of insert numerous things that could happen here, whether it's moms, you know, dealing with addiction, dads dealing with addiction, dad's in jail, mom's in jail, grandma's too tired, or people are working multiple jobs like that. Those conversations of school choice it's not happening.
No.
It's not going to happen. And that's why I love being a part of a company that's working to remedy on that end, because no kid learns in a vacuum.
Yeah.
They're affected by everything. So to be working with a company now that can help not solve, but help support and elevate and raise up those people who are dealing with those issues, so that then they in turn can elevate their children and we can start breaking some of those cycles.
Yep.
You know, like no world should we live in which they use kindergarten entrance rates to dictate their prison populations in 20 years. Like,
100%.
that's not a world that we should be living in.
Totally.
So anything that on my personal soapbox I can do to help break those cycles, like I'm down, and I'm going to do to the best of my nature, because that's not a world I'm okay existing in.
That's
and I don't
awesome.
think a lot of people are. You know?
Totally. And I think that also can kind of bring us in perfectly of like how we as ARC can support school districts in helping children that parents are not at the right place in their life, or may need some support, or may need help, and how we can become that resource in that place. Can a child reach out to us? You know, all those things of like how we can support school districts. I mean, it's when Tori brought this up of, you know, introduction with Renee, it was so interesting because it was like, I serve in that world. I give my time. I love to love on children that need love. So with that, do you feel like addiction in family members or even in older kids is something that's becoming more prevalent?
Yes.
In a school district?
Just as much as there's a fentanyl crisis everywhere, there is not a neighborhood that's not being affected by that. There is so many addiction things that are going on. And unfortunately, the kids are getting younger and younger. So we make these vape sticks and things. And it's one of the biggest offenses in schools. Our kids are carrying around their vape sticks. Or now that marijuana is legal, it's coming on to schools all the time. So addiction, what I've seen happen is it's not just parents anymore, but it's starting to go down into the younger and younger students. And it's starting to affect families, and it affects everybody and their choices, of course. And they're introduced to it so early.
So young.
It's just so young. And the problem is they don't understand the effects. So when you start saying, oh, wow, this is fun. Do you want to do this? They don't think about tomorrow, or they don't think about what's happening down the road. They start doing that, and that's how it becomes the addiction. It becomes this, well, I'm going to do it once, mess around. Well, that was kind of fun. Let's do it again. And then let's do it again, and it becomes a huge problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's
Scary.
It's crazy to think that too, because like, you know, tying into what we were talking about earlier with social media, like I only saw cigarettes if we passed a billboard. You know, like it was rare to see it on the shows that we were watching, or like what was in front of me. So that was never a desire for me. That was never something that was interesting. Wasn't really in the schools that much. But like, I know, like, and I've never been someone that gets into the vapes, but like you see those everywhere. And like you will be in the store or in the mall, and like the people that are holding those, I'm like, you can't even be 13 years old. I'm like, one, where are you getting those? Because like I know you can buy it, but like I'm pretty sure you have to be like 18 or 16 or something. I don't know.
People.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, right?
But you just swipe your mom's or your dad's, and
It
There you
comes
go.
from somewhere. No kid is showing up to school like it's mom's pills they're bringing.
Yep.
It's dad's pot that they're bringing. Like we would have second graders, first graders, kindergartners bring
Yep.
stuff in, and maybe they weren't bringing it to use intentionally,
Yeah.
but they're seeing mom or dad use it at home. And
like,
what
let
do
me
kids
grab
do,
some.
right? They watch way more than they listen. And so they bring it in, and that's now on campus. And now they're going to get in trouble for it, or they're not going to get in trouble. But either way, it came from mom and dad. Like I would do pickup, because, you know, most of our campuses are closed campuses now. And
Yeah.
so, you know, kids essentially are escorted off premises when they're young. And so I'd line up my class, and we'd wait for the cars to come and pick them up. And you would know the cars that would pull up, and they'd, you know, it'd be like a poof, like cloud. just
Look,
came out. And
we both
Obnoxious
knew.
clouds,
we both
too,
knew
huh?
together. Oh,
And I don't want to yuck anyone's yum. Like if you can be a responsible user or whatever it is, but at the end of the day, you are coming to pick up your child from school. You are driving a vehicle.
you hotboxed them.
You hotboxed your kid, and now you're driving under the influence on your way home. And I know I'm sending your kid home with homework and permission slips, and I'm never going to see any of that stuff again. That child's not going to have a single conversation with their parent. And you knew the ones. You knew the ones that were going to roll up, and it would just be the hot box that rolled up, and you're
In
just
the car.
in the
Ugh.
car. And it was, I felt so bad too. There were a couple that it was just garbage everywhere. Like their car seat was just nasty. Like you just knew that kid was not being taken care of. And I think that's where art can come in because there was a teacher I taught with and she had my favorite saying, and it's not universal, but I loved it. She would always say, find the parent, find the problem. If you had a kid who's having a problem, you find the parent, you're going to find the problem 9 times out of 10. And those were always the kids. The hot box kids would be the ones who came in who weren't taken care of. They wore the same school clothes to school every day. They hadn't eaten, hadn't slept.
God, that puzzles me. How could you, oh my God, like it's such a natural thing as like, I mean, at least for me, and it's sad that it's not for everybody, but like such a natural thing for like, to want to take care of your kids. Like it's not even, you don't even deserve a pat on the back. It's just like, that's your responsibility.
Right.
You love your kids, you take care of them. Like how could people do that? Like that to me, the fact that you ladies work in that and you guys are able to see that and still like taking that home, you have to be taking that home. I wouldn't be able to compartmentalize
you do
that.
take it home. You do, and that's one of the things that kind of led to my demise as a teacher because, you know, I had little girls who were 4 and 1 at the time, and they didn't understand that mom needed to come home and like scream into a pillow for 30 minutes to be okay because I mommied 28 little kids all day. At that point, that's what I was doing as I was mom for a lot of them, and then I'd come home and I'd have to mom my own kids. And as we've talked about before, parenting is exhausting.
Oh man!
And so I couldn't anymore. And I came down to the decision where I had to choose between my profession and my love for taking care of little kids and my own children. And it kills me that it came to that, you know, but you internalize it and you take it with you because you're working in a broken system. Everyone's working in a broken system. And you just kind of sometimes sit around and look at each other like, I don't know. No one's got the answers sometimes, you know?
And that's where you just took me full circle. And that's why we need those outside agencies and things to be able to help support. And you can't just look at it as the student part of things. It's like the whole family because you're affected by your surroundings.
Yeah.
Your child feels safe. So they're able to share things with you. Children don't feel safe at home. When you have a parent who is suffering from addiction, that's not just the fact that you're being neglected, but do you feel safe? Do you feel like a sense of security? So then you give them all of those things that they're bringing. So we have to rely on everybody, and it's everybody going into this. And let's even talk about the fact of how much substance abuse has increased because of the pandemic.
Oh, man. Oh,
yes, we isolated so many people. We took so many people out of the opportunity to talk to others. Then that just escalated their problems, and it hasn't gotten better.
And
So
the self-medicating.
Oh,
and
my
the-
goodness.
And then weed got legalized around that
Drinking.
same time too. It's like, hey, we see a hole here to make some money. Boom, people are depressed.
Yeah, you're stuck in your house. We feel a little sorry for you.
Yeah.
That's
well,
crazy.
and I think to it too, you know, like for me during 2020, like I think COVID had a different effects on every person depending on their situation they were in. You know, I was living at home with my sister and her now husband. We didn't have kids. We didn't have like a lot of external stressors. We had some work stress, but we didn't have work stress mixed with school, mixed with parents that are ill. You know, we didn't have the multitude of problems that you could have. So like we really weren't a group of people that like were drinking every night or having, you know, cocktails starting at 5:00. That was not something that we did. But then on the flip side, I would hear my friends be like, oh, it's almost 5:00. I can have my drink. And it's like, that's what people were doing to survive, was turning to alcohol or the legalized marijuana. And now people that maybe didn't have an issue came out of it with an issue.
Yeah.
Because some people thrive off of human interaction. I am a turtle. Like,
My
put
wife.
me in my shell, give me a book, and I'm happy. I can function alone for days. But other people are not like that. Other people need that interaction. Like, it's just, and then you take the personalization out of it because you're covering your face. So you're not seeing somebody smile. And like, I'm sorry, I smiled with the mask on and I looked like a serial killer. Until I was smiling, my eyes did not look inviting. And I was like, well, that's intimidating, you know? But you think about it now that we've come out this other side. Like, I am a big person. I will wave to every single person I pass in my neighborhood. Even if they're like on the street outside of my neighborhood and they're like walking in, I don't know, I still will wave.
Nice.
And the amount of times people wave back is less than the time that they don't wave back. Like, I'm actually shocked when somebody waves back. I mean, I got annoyed one day and I was walking outside and there was somebody on the other side of the street and I was waving to them and they weren't waving back. I'm like, hi, I'm waving to you, and this was after COVID and that probably wasn't the nicest, but I said it in a sweet way. But it's like we desensitized to being human, to having kind interactions, to saying hi to the person checking out our groceries because of the fear that was put into us. And it's like, then you think of that being in the kids mixed with the parents drinking and smoking and maybe progressing on to harder things. Like, that's something a child notices. That's something, a burden they carry. And like, I'm sure that there is a teacher in a school district that a child has come to and said, my daddy drinks too much or my mommy drinks too much, and like the weight that the teacher has. But then also, like, we are a resource at ARC to anybody that would need help. But like, what's like a positive way of introducing that help?
Well, the topper on that is teachers are mandated reporters, right? So if a child reports anything or if anything's sensed to be unsafe, the child doesn't feel safe in their home, you notice, like, you're sitting on Zoom and you see something in the background, which a lot of teachers had ended up seeing. Like, teachers are mandated reporters. They have to report to the state anything that could endanger a child. So if a child comes and says, dad was too drunk to get me to school on time, or, X, whatever you want to insert here.
Oh, God, I couldn't really imagine.
Well, and you hear it a lot, and teachers are automatically put into a scenario to report it. And it's overtaxing a system that can't handle the amount of reports that they get. Child Protective Services cannot handle the amount of reports that I had reported things even before the pandemic where nothing would really get handled. I had a student who I had to report to, and he was back home that evening. And I was like, this kid has bruises that I know where they came from. And he reported where they came from. And he went back home that night to his abuser because CPS was like, we can't get there on time. We have nowhere to report it. Like, it's an overtaxed system. So when you drive everyone into their homes and now you have who makes a terrible roommate is a 5-year-old and locked in their house. Like, there's no good scenario. It's already stressful. And so if you are dealing with your own mental health issues and then you're locked in your house with your 6-year-old who doesn't want to be locked in their home, like, it's going to complicate it even further.
Why? That's them all day long. But why?
I'm bored.
I'm bored.
I'm bored.
Because even they'll tap out on screen time at that point,
for sure.
But see, that to me also it sparks another issue. Okay, the child confided in you. They felt safe enough to tell you. And then the system failed the child.
Constantly.
Not because necessarily we want to fail the child. Like, I know that somebody working at CPS is not actively going to work. I mean, I would want to say I'm pretty confident they're not actively going to work saying, I'm going to see how many people I can get back in their home, even though there's an issue. People that work in that industry, I like to think have a good heart. But when you're that exhausted and your resources are that exhausted and you don't have the ability to place somebody in a different home, that was one of the groups that we worked with, the boys' home, where there's just, a bunch of orphans. And it's like, it's just so crazy to think what we're all up against. And then what you're throwing in it with the fentanyl addiction, the fentanyl and COVID and the masks and the everything.
And that's why I think the work that Renee is doing and that Mesa Public and a lot of school districts are doing is so important of let's get the resources to the families before there's a report, before there's an issue, before there's an incident that
when they can choose to change if they want to.
Put those supports in the hands of the parents before it starts affecting the child, because that's a weight that no child should ever have to carry, and so many do. And then okay, you grew up and you're in kindergarten and first grade and your mom or your dad is dealing with addiction, so you don't get the proper education. It's not going to get better from there. Now you're in high school, and because you didn't get math in second grade, you're not going to understand math in 8th grade, and now you can't get your credits in high school, so you don't graduate. So you don't get a high school diploma. You're not going to go to college. You don't get the career. I mean, the span that it takes on from that singular beginning, that if we could have gotten that parent the help that they needed, that child child the help that they needed, because as Renee says, the schools are a sanctuary. Like, we would have parents show up and be like, my kid has to take medication and I don't know where to get it refilled. And you're like, I'm not a pharmacy, but I'll help you figure it out. Like, they are the sanctuary. So the schools are a great place to funnel this information through and to get that word out to parents of, every parent loves their child, but sometimes they get caught up in these things, right? And we lose that focus. So how can we tip that light bulb in that parent's head of like, ooh, I could get help and be there for my kid the way that I want to be, that I'm not capable of doing now. And those programs need to come in before the mandated report needs to be made. Because at that point, what do you
that's
do?
like, for example, Vance, who we have as our ambassador here, he goes into high schools and talks about his past and his history with, substance abuse and what could happen. And, maybe that sparks the conversation for that teenager to go home and say, hey, like we heard this guy and he works at this place and maybe they could help you. And, that may not be always received well, but I like to think that if it's coming from your child, like you probably will hear it. So it's like, in elementary school, that's probably too young for them to be like, well, what's that? And they were in a coma because they did drugs, like that's overwhelming. But being able to have this book, hey, mommy and daddy, our teacher said that there's stuff in here that might help you. Well, then they're going to flip through the little pamphlet and, maybe stumble upon that, and the website that you guys have created, like those little things, like even if it just helps one parent, it does good.
Well, and I think that's, for any of your listeners who are parents or anything, Mesa does build a website of parent resources that if you are dealing with food insecurity or experiencing homelessness or dealing with substance use disorder, like that you can go to Mesa's website and they have these resources for parents to pick up and get a hold of. Or you can, a lot of schools have family coordinators.
Yeah, family specialists.
Family specialists, thank you. And you can connect with a family specialist and they'll help you figure out where to get these supports. And and I think that's just brilliant because that's what's needed.
Yeah. And the parent page we actually keep up on. Right. So we continually add because the needs are ever changing. We never know. So one of the big needs that we're having right now and it's something that you're like, really? I just take that for granted. Where do I go do my laundry? I don't have any laundry services because I can't afford laundry. Who can I do free laundry at? Or I need to take a shower. Where do I get free, showers? So when people start asking us questions like that, we research and then we put it on those parent information pages to give them those resources. The worst thing I think is being a child or even being a parent. When you are in trauma and you're in the forest, you can't see the trees. Yeah. You don't even recognize. So the kids don't even recognize the fact that it's time for DPS to come in.
Yeah.
The parents don't even need, they don't recognize that, oh, wow, it's time for me to go out and ask for help. They're too into that. So that's why having these resources there and talking about it and communicating, then those things open up. Then people are able to see, oh, wait, I don't like what's happening right now. There is a different way. And there's somebody who can help me to find the different way. So that's why it's really important to have all of the resources and continually to add to those. Because you know what I say? My job is like a bucket lately. So it's like imagining a bucket that's got a hole in it and it's sprung a leak because there's water in there. I fill that hole. And as soon as I do that, 2 more holes come out because the needs are so great right now.
Well, especially post-pandemic.
Oh, yes.
It created a slew of issues. I know that I go through issues. My sister and I go through challenges that normal people my age would not go through. And it's post-pandemic stuff, losing income for a certain amount of time, losing insurance for a certain number of time, not being able to work because you had COVID for a month, things that we would have never expected to prepare for. And then you throw in having children to take care of, getting your children to sports or after curricular activities, or I work. So they need something after 2:00 or 3:00 when the school gets out, or before because I'm in work earlier. Like there's so many things where you can never have too many resources.
Never.
Ever.
Well, and for Title I schools, like a lot of parents who are in those scenarios who have kids in Title I schools, a lot of them were frontline workers, right? They're the custodian for the office building. They're working the McDonald's frontline. Like they were still having to go to work. So we had a lot of parents who were like, yeah, the schools are closed, but my job isn't. I have to show up and stock the aisles at Fry's. Like that's my job. And if I don't do that, my kid doesn't eat.
Yep.
So what do you do with that scenario where the schools are closed? That's your safe harbor. That's your sanctuary. And now you can't get there. Okay, maybe you have grandma, but grandma's 92 and not feeling so good, or a bevy of other solutions that we had a lot of parents who were communal, right? They would say, okay, Thursday's my day off from In-N-Out. So bring all your kids to my place. So then you've got them lined up, because Mesa would send home all the kids with a computer to try and get them on to keep some semblance of learning going. Right. But you would see like in the background of your Zoom classes, just rows of kids with one parent to be like, watch the screen. And those were the best case scenarios.
Yeah.
Those were the ones where like, oh, okay, I have some hope. There's one parent there. There were other scenarios where it was like,
the high schooler was home.
Yeah, the high schooler was home or the sixth grader was home. And you're just really open for the best there.
Oh my God. That was, I just want to say that I am so grateful and thankful to God that we are talking about this in a past tense.
Right.
That was a nightmare.
Yes.
That was such a nightmare. Like I kind of was listening to what you were saying. My wife and I kind of fell under that category where it was like our house at the time we were living. This was before we bought our house. It was about as big as 2 of these rooms together, including the bathroom. So it was a very, very small, like little place, right? And we both work in behavioral health. So it was like addiction, taking that stuff home every day. All of a sudden, work completely shut down because ARC is trying to figure out like, okay, we have to work in between these parameters of what we're allowed to do now. And my wife, it's like now she's working home full time. Now my kids need a desk to do this homework stuff at home, right? And it's like, dude, like, yeah, I totally, I'm not in recovery, but I totally fell into that category of like, bro, we just bought an air fryer. Like, I'm going to go home and have a drink. Like I need, because even like the adults, nobody knew what the hell was going on. Like everyone was scared. This was new for everybody. And I hated seeing my babies having to wear these masks. I hated that. It was like putting butterflies in a cage because we're so extroverted in my household. Like now we have to stay here, but and one of the statistics that I heard during that time, I can't remember the actual number, but they said that people were not showing up to schools anymore. Like the percentage of like the little kids that were just kind of unaccounted for, like whereas before people would like sign kids out or whatever, like just kids weren't showing up back to schools. So that means more children were stuck in homes of abuse, physical, sexual, mental. I mean, all this horrible stuff. Do you guys see now that COVID is over, has there been a huge influx of positivity, like as far as people fighting against what all of that caused?
We've always been partnering with individuals, but we've really been looking at the whole child and being able to make sure we have those resources that are there. So there has been so many losses. So the losses were both in academics. You guys are talking about putting kids on computers. That just was not very helpful. So the academic loss, so bringing that in, but really we've been looking on the behavioral health. So one of the things that we were talking about earlier is that, you get in your time in which you can't see and get everything done that you need to do. You were talking about how, you got families who they have to go to work to put food on the table. They have to be able to do all of these things. There's always barriers that are in the way. Even parents who know that their kids are suffering from anxiety, depression, and all of those, they don't have a means to take them to a place to get that help. So what we've done in the school system is broken down that gate. We've just taken that barrier and taken it away. And we partner with behavioral health services and we bring those into our schools.
That's awesome.
And those kids go to their therapy session during their school day. So with parental consent, they do the intake process just like going into the clinic. They get that same therapeutics, but it's in a place that it's a continuity of service. They're able to get all of that. We bring in tons of classes. The one good thing about the pandemic is everybody knows how to do virtual now. That's a good thing. So we put on classes and things for parents to be able to help. with talking about how do you recognize these things in your family, and these are the resources. And we put those out as webinars, and we put those out as classes that they can take online through our parent university is what we call that. So it's that ever-changing part of things that is going to continue to change, but it's bringing in what we can do and breaking down as many gates as we can.
Yeah.
Having people to understand the fact that it's okay not to be okay. What's not okay is saying, I'm not okay, but it's too late. I'm not going to do anything about it.
Yeah.
You know what? You're my kid. You'll survive this.
You'll pull it together.
You're resilient.
Yep.
That is one of my pet peeves. Kids are resilient, but
Not
to a point.
Yeah, they still need that nurturing.
Yes, when people will say they're resilient, and I'm like, oh my, to a point. Everybody can stumble and fall, but you can't get pushed down and get up.
There's always a breaking point where you can only, like, I always think, to me, you know, with my faith, like, they always say there's nothing, you're never given more than you can handle. But like, for me, I believe there's nothing more, and you're not given anything more you can handle without God. But as a child, you aren't at that age to depend on somebody else or whatever, you know, God is for you. Like, so for me, I know that I turn to prayer and I can do that.
Yeah.
But as a child, you need your mom, you need your dad, or you need your safe space, whatever that is. You need that. And if your safe space was school and that was taken away from you amongst the time that you are, like, probably the most scared that you've ever been in your life, not getting food and all these other things, that trauma coming out of that is going to be so much greater. So being able to get that therapy in the school at a place that's familiar with a person that's familiar, and then not having to add in, oh, well, I can't get them a ride. We can't get them there. Like, you're eliminating all the barriers. It's just like, here, this is what we can do for you.
One, to give it like some before and after. So like to that is like, before the pandemic, you know, when you get handed your class list as a teacher, you get marked a bunch of different information. You get, like, are they academically high, medium, low? And then behaviorally, do they have any severe behavior? Do they have special education services, speech, yada, yada. Before the pandemic, I would have in my class maybe one severe behavior a year, maybe two. But that was about it. And you knew about them so that you could, from the get-go, do they have a plan in place to support their behavior? Do they have services in place?
And what were those behaviors? Like, what were...
So before the pandemic, it was usually, because, you know, I taught second graders, so their emotional control is limited at best. Yeah. So before the pandemic, those behaviors tended to be like hitting on the playground, getting angry. Very rarely, like, I had a little boy who, when he got mad, he would walk up to the whiteboard and just, like, make direct eye contact and take my whiteboard markers and just like, I see you, Mrs. J. Like, that was it. Right. Okay. And that was maybe one kid a year, and you loved the little babe, and you're like, because you knew that kid needed love more than anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, the loudest one in the room was the one who needed the most amount of care. And post-pandemic, it escalated into assaulting other students, assaulting teachers. I was assaulted on my first day back of school, my last year. It's one of the things that kind of, like, was a catalyst for me being like, I might be done. I had a kid who got into a fight with her sister. I broke it up. We were waiting for security, and I had to hold my student, who's 7. So yes, I got beat up by a 7-year-old. Not my proudest, but she decided she couldn't beat on her sister. She would throw as much of her body weight onto my right foot as she could. And it took security maybe 5 or 6 minutes to get to her. And she busted up a bunch of the tendons in my foot. I ended up in a boot. And not 2 weeks later, my teaching neighbor got punched in the stomach by one of her students. Wow. And so it just got bigger. And so I was having class lists that were like 3 or 4 severe behaviors. And that's just in my classroom. And there's 3 to 4 in the next classroom. You know, there's 4 second grades, and each of us have 3 to 4 severe behaviors. And it's now elevated. You know, the TikTok trends came about. You know, it was...
Did you like my oi?
Oh, God.
It was horrific. I had a teacher, she teaches in Nevada, but she had her computer stolen, and they videotaped themselves throwing her computer out the bus window. They had Slap a Teacher Month. You know, I mean...
Oh, my God.
Destroy the bathrooms?
Destroy the bathrooms, ripping paper towel holders off the wall. Just severe didn't even begin. Severe used to mean like, oh, they got angry and we needed a safe place in the room for them to go and handle their anger and work through, different strategies to support it. It just elevated to the point where you were on the daily, just walking through fire, trying not to get burned. And Mesa was coping with it to provide as many services as they could. We went from having pre-pandemic, we had one counselor that we shared with another school. So she would be there like Monday, Wednesday, the others Thursday, Friday, and she would do lessons with the kids about, name your feelings, calm down, pick a strategy that's going to help you. And then in the pandemic, and as it grew, we went from one counselor that we shared with another school to 2 full-time counselors and a social worker, plus outside therapy that was brought in for the students who really needed it. I think it was Southwest Behavioral Services that a lot of my students attended, and thank God for them, because it was scenarios just like that. And it became just this, like, how do you keep up with that?
Yeah.
How do you possibly, and you can't come back to the parents, because the parents are struggling in their own issues. Like the student who got into it with me, she was back in my classroom the next day because we all knew too well. I spoke with my principal and she's like, should we do a suspension? Yada, yada. I was like, you can't send her home. I know that home. That home has had like 3 or 4, reports on it. You can't. So she was back in my room the next day. Because there was nothing else to do. You can't go to the mom. The mom wasn't capable and dad wasn't there. And so it's just this,
God.
To bring it back where we're talking about you have to bring in this community. It has to be a community effort, because a teacher or an administrator, a principal, even a school district, we're all fighting this battle that's so much bigger than ourselves because of the way that it's kind of exploded post-COVID. And even with all those added resources, it's like, still, like, no teacher should be physically assaulted. No person should be physically assaulted at their job.
Are the school districts now, are they like, you talked about the Red for Ed earlier. Are the school districts now, like the people who handle the money, I guess, like the big wig people, are they understanding a little bit more of like the needs of the teachers, like with the things that you guys, like, are they helping at all? Like, how do we change that? That's one thing that I feel like, even with like a platform like this, like the fact that we're talking about this, it's very important. People need to hear it, but at the same time, it's like, man, we got to try and do something to kind of make this, they're not doing it for us. We got to do it ourselves type of a thing, like, that's why I wasn't sure about your experience now. Like if teachers are getting more, I mean, you guys deserve to get paid as much as doctors do, man, like for reals, it's just so sad.
I mean, my personal, and then I'll definitely defer to Renee because she's much more informed on this now that I was like, peace, I'm out. My personal, from what I've heard from teachers and from my exit is, the school districts are doing everything they can to allocate money appropriately to their teachers and keeping it a proper wage. They're ultimately capped by the state and by federal funds. I mean, that at the end of the day is the big dictator of it all, right? They can only dictate they can only give out what they're given. So I think there's definitely still room for growth. My personal opinion, and I am completely 100% biased, that teachers should be paid on the par of doctors and lawyers. I mean, during Red for Ed, it came out that, I, at the time of Red for Ed, had my master's in education. I had 2 bachelor degrees, and I was a national board certified teacher, which is a kind of a 3-year program that you go through. And I made the equivalent of a McDonald's manager. That was like my equivalent of it all. And I never at one point blamed Mesa for it, because Mesa was doing all they could to delve out and teach their, treat their teachers. I saw teachers treated much more poorly than myself at other districts. And so I think, that is we've talked about worlds that are okay and worlds that are not okay. If, teachers at the end of the day, they make the doctors and they make the lawyers, right? You don't have a lawyer, you don't have a doctor without teachers. And it's predicated on a system that was built where, hundreds of years ago, they figured out that if women were the ones teaching, you could pay them less. Like, that's where our profession has been built upon. And so I think there's definite room for growth. And I think it's going to come from the state level. Particularly, I think it's come from the federal level. And that's where my stand on it is, and I'll get off my soapbox and let
No.
Renee.
No, because it's a good stand. So money is a part of it. I totally agree. But really, it's interesting. A lot of teachers who've left the profession have said it's not just the money, it's the lack of support.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
It's the lack of support. So I can live with the fact that I knew that the wages weren't going to be high, but it's the absolute lack of support or having somebody who's never stepped a day in a classroom, but will make legislation that goes counterintuitive to what really is best for these kids. So, money is always great. We all need that. We're all supporting families. Every teacher I know is doing that for a reason, but it's truly the support. And that's where I hope people understand we vote for these individuals who pass big legislation about our children. Make sure that you know who they are and they align with the values that you would like to have in there, because it truly, the state superintendent of public instruction is on the ballot, and people don't even know who's running for it usually. And I'm grateful because I have family who call me and say, "Who should I vote for?"
Right, same. Yep.
Wow.
But most of the time, people don't know. And even more than that, you really need to know about who your governing board is.
Yes, your school board.
Oh, your school board is so powerful because they can either be very supportive and help, or they can make things really difficult because they just don't understand. So it's truly important that I think wages are always great.
Oh, yeah.
But it's the support part. I think it's the lack, and it's the lack of support when the parents come in and I loved your example. That the child is that way because of their parent. Our climate and culture has changed so much. We go out and we see parents come into offices and yelling at secretaries and things. Or as a principal, I would call and say, I've had an issue with your child, and they would start yelling at me about it. Whereas when I was a kid, oh my gosh, when I was a kid, if my school called my mom and dad, they wouldn't even want to hear my side of the story. They would have been like, that will never happen again.
Yeah.
Oh, it's terrifying how the lack of respect for educators, it's absolutely atrocious. We have like 4 or 5 parents who were banned from our campus for threatening teachers, threatening administrators. One of my favorite, there's a teacher comedian who had a joke, and he was talking about a very real scenario that happened where the parent was berating him, like, I pay my taxes, I'm your boss, blah, blah, blah. And he turned around and he's like, well, sir, I pay my taxes too. So by your definition, I'm self-employed. And like walked away. I was like, that's the greatest response of my life. But it's very true. There's a massive amount from both the legislative level and from the parent level of no longer trusting or believing in educators who are there to do the best for you. Because, you send your kids to school. I send my daughters to school, I'm sure. Like those teachers see my kids often more than I do. But then at the same time, I would run the math every year. I do parent-teacher conferences, and I ran the math on it. And with the amount of time that I had, when you subtract recess, specials like music and PE and all of that stuff, times across the number of kids that I had in that classroom, I had 11 minutes per day to affect that child.
Jeez.
Because it's overcrowded, right? Like I would have 28 kids in the classroom at 11 minutes per day, but at the same time, they're with me all day. So please trust that I'm doing everything I can and that I am educated to the point of taking care of this scenario. It's like we've stopped trusting in professionals, and it's insane. So yeah, that's a huge part of it. I like money too, but that's a huge part of it.
It is. And the thing is it's amazing about when you feel supported, you're willing to be able to go. That's where the whole burnout comes from. So we end up having it to where teachers don't stay in the profession, and that is a shame because these people have gone in there. They've listened to even Tori here. This is a highly educated person who went through tons of extra training.
Yep.
She is that best person to put up in front of those students. But when we don't support them, we are now going in and we are taking people who are not really qualified and needing to put them in front of students simply because We have to have teachers. That's why there's a teacher shortage. I don't believe, this is my own opinion, I don't believe there's a teacher shortage because of lack of wages.
No, that's
I
true.
believe it's because of lack of support.
Yeah, makes a huge difference. I mean, I can hear you guys talk, and specifically Tori, like it can hear the passion that you have and the love that you have for kids. Like it's very obvious, you know what I mean? So like to get out of that, I mean, that must suck, especially when that's such a natural gift to you and you put in so much work and time, you know what I mean? And now it's just like leaves a bad taste in your mouth,
Oh, thank you. I loved my kiddos. Yeah.
So like, going back to, the mental health and all of those things, kind of tying everything together, what advice would you guys give parents to better help support their kids? Because just like with Michaela, for all the listeners out there, Michaela had to leave silently. She had a meeting or something that she had to go through. But, what advice could you give to parents that they're still trying to kind of figure out how to survive post-pandemic? A lot of adults are struggling with mental health and depression and anxiety. But how could we better support our kids to make sure, like I love what you said, Miss Renee, about the school resources. Make sure that you guys are going to the schools, because the schools will be able to provide a lot, but you have to be able to communicate and talk about the things that you're experiencing. But what other ways could we help?
Yes, live in the moment and listen to your children. There's such a short time that you have to be with them. When you are with them, put your own phone down and pay attention. Have those conversations. Both of you are great parents, I can already tell, because both of you had said the fact that you made those relationships that your kids can come and talk to you. You are your child's first line of defense. And when they tell you something, believe them. Believe them and make sure that you are there. So get that level of trust and that respect with your kids. And then just make sure that you're actively engaged and knowing what's going on in their lives. It's truly the fact that we don't know the problems we don't have because we're going to keep experiencing them. There's nobody's life who's perfect, and it's just going to continue to evolve and change. You just have to be aware of it. Make sure that you're talking and seeking the help, because we all don't have the answers either. So when your kids feel safe with you and they come and ask you, you say, I don't know, but we'll find out.
Yeah, and I think building that safe place it's about vulnerability. Like super props to you that like you've built that space to be okay to be vulnerable. That comes top down, right? Like one of the things that I love seeing in this change in parenting, I think particularly for dads, but I think for moms too, but I'm seeing this like lack of this toxic masculinity that has been around for so long. Like, it's rough. And to get rid of that and to be open and for it to be okay to not be okay, like you said earlier, particularly in front of your kids. Like your kids watch way more than they listen. They do. And so for you to be like, you know what? Mom's not okay right now. I am stressed, because what you're doing is you're providing that example. You are modeling an example of how to cope with your emotions. If you clamp it down, everything's fine, keep it together for the kids know it's not fine. They're smarter than they look. They know it's not fine. And what they're seeing is if I clamp it down and keep it together, then, it'll all go away. So that's what I have to do with my emotions. And then they freak out eventually because they're kids and your brain's not done till you're 25 or something like that. So provide a space in your home where you are allowed to tell your kids, Mom, Dad, Grandma, whoever you are to them, I am stressed right now and I need to go take a walk around the block. You want to go take a walk with me? Because I'm just like, whoa, struggling. Because then when they're struggling, they'll be there with you and they'll know how to handle it and they'll know how to approach you about it. And I think that's a brilliant change in parenting. Also, communicate with your teachers. Your kids' teachers want to communicate with you. And I'm sure you get this all the time too, like any parent who has a school kid. Oh, what'd you do today? I don't know.
I know.
How was your day? I don't remember.
What'd you do? Nothing.
It was good.
You were there 8 hours. You did nothing.
It was good.
It was fine.
Yeah.
Give your kid a specific message, talking about social media stuff. There are tons of communication sources to text your teachers.
Yes.
Message. I can't make a phone call for the life of me, but I'll text you all day.
Yeah.
Text your teacher. Be like, hey, what's a great way for me to text with you? Ask them, what'd you do today? Oh, we talked about, the Revolutionary War and we talked about XYZ. Then with your kid, oh, dude, I heard you learned about, Washington today. What'd you learn about? Give that kid specifics and I guarantee you'll get a conversation, and use that communication with your teacher because they want to know all teachers want to communicate with the parents. Just provide that window for them in whatever terms work for you.
You know, I think that's so great to hear that as well. I mean, I struggle with, you know, my insecurities as a parent, and I know my wife does too. You know, it's like we're still trying to navigate through it together. Like
Right?
you think when you're a kid, like adults have it all figured out, but not only do we not, but then you throw the pandemic in on top of it. It's good to know that parents can reach out to the teachers and that the teachers even want to hear from the parents.
Yes.
And my wife, you know, that is one of the things that I am, you know, I really do try and do my part as a husband. You know, I clean the house, I wash dishes, I cook, I do all of those things. But maybe it's just because I never had that. My mom was a single mom. So when she would come home from her jobs, she would make dinner. She was exhausted and she was raising 2 boys. So she's like, all right, you guys did homework?
Yeah.
Okay. Like she would take my word for it, and she had to go to bed. So I took advantage of that without even realizing it, you know? So for me, that's not a very strong part that I have. But my wife, on the other end, is like, when she's doing these assignments with our kids, it's such a beautiful thing. And I love that trait about her. She cares more about the assignments than my kids do. She's like, no, we need to do this and we need to do that. Get your ass off the couch. Like, come over here and do that. And I'm so grateful for that. But I could never imagine a world where I had to do that by myself.
Right.
Especially nowadays.
Right.
Oh, it's impossible. It's impossible. And that's why having a teacher, it kind of in that weird, like, it takes a village co-parenting like scenario. Like, teachers want to be. One of my favorite things was whenever, and I would tell parents outright, I was like, if you have a birthday party, you want me to come, your kid has a soccer game, you want me to be there, tell me the date.
That's
will
cool.
go.
That's super
because
cool.
to me, like when I marched and read for Ed, I wrote out the name of every single child I had ever taught. Like that was my poster, was the name of every single child I ever taught, because that's who I was marching for. Those kids were my family. They were my babies as much as anyone. And so if you want to build that connection with your teacher and have them there as a resource in your family, they will show up for you.
That's
because
cool.
that's why they got there in the first place. And that's almost the part I miss more than anything, is just being part of that family. Like I'd go beginning of every school year, I would send out a message being like, if you'd like me to come visit your home and see what your scenario is like and like where the kids' room is and we can have some dinner, like I will be there for you. Because to me, that's the relationship I'm going to build with you over the next 180 days. And it will continue beyond those 180
That's
days.
great.
So use them. You know?
Thank you guys, for coming on the show, and thank you guys so much for giving that little bit of hope, man. It's so easy to get tangled in your own thoughts, and just the world is so full of distractions. But it makes my heart happy to know that even post pandemic, where if you look on a TV screen, if you look on the news or whatever, it's nothing but negativity. It's good to know that people that love even more now, and that there's still people out there that care. You know what I'm saying? I think a lot of people need to remember that.
Yeah.
Because I mean, we're still shell shocked from 2020.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we will probably be for a little while.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, thank you guys very much. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been amazing. I hope you guys love that. Give a huge round of applause, Tori and Renee, one more time for coming on the show. You know, this is a beautiful experience, and I'm so grateful for the stories and the stuff that we get to hear. And, for anyone who's listening out there, I really hope and pray that, this maybe opened up your brain and can allow you to ask questions, or maybe it allows you to get closer to your teachers or whatever. But it's absolutely true. It definitely takes a village, for us to be able to raise each other up. We have to do that for each other. And don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable with your babies. It's not a weakness. Trust me, your kids need to hear that you go through struggles too, man. We're not robots. You know what I'm saying? But, just thank you guys very much. I appreciate it. All right. So for all you guys, all you listeners out there, please share this with a loved one, whoever it may be. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your week. Thank you, Michaela, for stopping by. Much love. God bless. Peace. What's going on, everybody? This is Buddha from the ARCast, and I just wanted to thank you for checking out this week's episode. It means a lot, and if you could share it with a friend or a loved one, somebody you need in recovery, or maybe somebody who just needs that little bit of extra positivity in their life, we'd greatly appreciate it. If you would like to join us here on the ARCast, either in the studio live or online, hit us up. The links are down in the show notes of this episode, and on there, you can find direct links to our main website here at Americas Rehab Campus and all of our social media platforms. Follow us. We keep the post positive and motivational, focused on recovery, health, and wellness. As you know, in this modern day and age, we need as much love as possible, y'all. And as always, if you or somebody you know is in need of substance abuse treatment, please don't hesitate to give us a call. We're open 24 hours a day, and our direct phone number is 1-833-272-7342. Once again, that phone number is 1-833-272-7342. I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your day. Much love and God bless. Peace.